I am so happy to have an opportunity to talk to someone that's paying attention and letting us know what's really going on in Cuba now that everybody's kind of moved away and it's no longer exciting and shiny. Joining me on the line is Jacob Airy. He is the author and he's a Daily Wire contributor and host of StudioJake. Welcome to AM 560. Jacob, are you there?
Thank you so much for having Yes, thank you so much for having me on.
It's my pleasure. So Cuba bans pastors from visiting Religious Freedom Summit. Oh, my goodness. What is that all about?
Well, as you know, once a year we have this conference where for religious liberty, and a bunch of pastors get together. And so some pastors from Cuba, Reverend Moisés de Preda Esquivel, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Oh, you're doing a lot better job. I was looking at the names during the break, and I said, I hope Jacob can pronounce those, and you did a great job, because I'm not even going to try.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, him and a few of his friends, they were traveling on behalf of the Alliance of Evangelical Churches of Cuba, and that's what it's known as in English, obviously. And they were just stopped by the state security at an airport in Havana, and they were just blatantly told, you will not attend this event. They held them until the plane took them off, and even denied them visa renewals, and a few people were just denied permissions. Previously, they had thought that they could go. Obviously, they made it to the airport, but then as soon as they got to the airport, the Cuba state security said, "No way, it's not happening. You're not going." And they basically detained them at the airport until the planes took off, so they just couldn't go.
Now, I'm just assuming, because there's a lot I don't know about Cuba, I'll have to confess, that we buy our tickets, we make sure we have our passport, and we go to the airport. So is the routine that they have to get permission to travel out of Cuba in general, or just when it's something that might be political or controversial, do they have to get permission or clearance?
My understanding is, yes, that every citizen, unless you're a party member, every citizen virtually has to get permission to leave the country. And it's very hard to come by permission. Like I said, these ministers thought they had permission, and then they get, like I said, they get to the airport and their visas are denied, or they're suddenly need to be renewed, and other such things. But they claim that they have travel freedom, but really they keep it under a very, very harsh lock and key.
Now, they were attending a conference that was in Washington, D.C. It's a religious freedom conference. Now, have they been allowed to go to that in previous years?
I'm not sure about these particular ministers, but my understanding is occasionally they'll allow a minister to attend, but it's usually not. It's usually not such a high priority, even for the church in Cuba. But my understanding is every once in a while they'll allow someone to go to a conference similar to this, but it's incredibly rare.
So as you state in the article, this is something that no one's talking about. Again, they've tried to market Cuba as this great place of late, and they've evolved and it's in a great lifestyle. So here these guys are not able to exercise their religious freedom, which is to Americans, which is very important. So how long were they detained? Were they arrested or just detained?
They were just detained at the airport. There was a reporter who was supposed to travel with them. Now, he was actually arrested and thrown in jail. The ministers were not. They were just held at the airport. But there was a few weeks prior, there was a reporter named Ricardo Fernandez Guerrera, I believe, and he was actually supposed to go ahead, and he was going to report on this conference, and he was actually arrested and thrown in prison for, I believe, if I recall correctly, it was several days. And then they just released him with no explanation. But yeah, it gets pretty serious there. As for the ministers, they were just held at the airport and told to go home after the plane left.
Now, are the religious leaders allowed to be vocal? Because we think about some oppressed countries over in Europe or in different places where you cannot speak up against the regime or you will be, punished. I mean, are these pastors speaking out about their experience, or how do they even get leaked to the media?
There is some some folks. My understanding is that there's a few Christian news websites that do have missionaries embedded, and that's how a lot of this news gets out. Sometimes it doesn't get out to America or the West for several. Of course, Cuba's in the West, but you understand what I'm saying. Sometimes it takes several days for this information to get out, even because they're traveling their different channels. But they are not allowed to speak out against the government. My understanding is they can speak on biblical principles as long as they align with the Communist Party in some way.
You know what I've just realized, Jacob, that I'm confusing Cuba with North Korea. So I'm just going to ask this question because hopefully other people are thinking the same thing. What is the internet access like over there to send out a text message or whatever, or to get these kind of stories out? Do they have limited or do they have any internet at all?
My understanding is, unlike North Korea, which has pretty much an internet ban, unless you're a party member or a member of the military, my understanding is Cuba has very, very limited access to internet. It's similar to China. China has access to internet, but they have a ton of restrictions on it. And my understanding is Cuba is similar. They have some light access to it, but it's very difficult to get messages out or get on social media and whatnot.
And just reading your article at Daily Wire and just reminded me of some horrible, Nazi Germany type of conditions when you're ready to go and you have all your papers and you're ready to travel. For them to have that kind of power to keep you from going where you want to go is just very scary. Now, you are the host of StudioJake. Is that radio, TV? How can people watch your show or listen to your show?
It's on YouTube. You can find it. Just search StudioJake, one word. It's a pop culture show. I've actually I've had on several people. We just talk about nerd things. Sometimes we talk about faith and occasionally politics.
And on Twitter, how can people find you?
You can find me at Real Jacob Airy. It's real, then Jacob just like in the Bible, and then it's my last name, Airey.
Well, thank you, Jake. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
It was a pleasure talking with you as well.